Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Xiaojun with Charlotte and Lily. You know, these years we see so many Chinese traveling around the world, and also we are seeing so many foreign tourists coming to China, and judging from what they wear, we don't really see that much difference.
That's true.
It's been developing, it's been changing, and the world is being integrated actually.
Yes.
This is so much different if we go back like 50, 60 years ago. China at the time was not that much connected with the outside world, and that's why, you know, what we did at the time was a bit different from the rest of the world. So today, basically, what we are going to do is we are going back to history, maybe 50, 60 years ago.
Okay.
We are going to show to the world, or we're going to talk about the changes happening in the past decades.
Evolution of fashion in China, yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about if we go back thousands of years back, it will be very different. But
You take your time.
If we go back even longer than that, everyone was the same.
That was
the beginning of human beings, you know.
Exactly.
You pick up leaves to cover certain parts, and that's
Animal
it.
skins.
Yeah.
That was globalization at that time.
There you go.
Yeah.
It was not globalization, but in a way we were the same. You
Right.
know, in the very, very, very beginning of civilization. So before we start, actually, if you want to watch the previous episodes of Crossover, you can always log on to this website. This is like my magic pose, you know.
Make
on
sure it's
TV.
coming in this direction, otherwise it's coming that way.
You should be able to watch to see the website address over here on your TV. And if you want to send us any comments, you can always send us emails, and you can always send us your video comments through this website. Let's just take a look at some pictures first. These are the pictures of the jackets or costumes that people wore in the 50s.
Back then, I think clothing was pretty uniform. There wasn't
Exactly.
too much diversity in what people wore.
It's very much like revolutionized. Everything it's revolutionary. Because remember, the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949. So that was after the Second World War, after the Civil War, and after a new government was founded. So everything seemed to be, you know, surrounding revolutionary. And you will see, and the first one is casual army uniform.
Well, it does look like army uniform.
Back then, you didn't have to be in the army. You didn't have to be a soldier to wear army uniforms.
Right. It's
Like a casual, like a casual army
Well,
uniform.
Yeah.
if you say green is the color of the army uniforms,
army
then
green.
you'll see lots of green jackets. And also the second one is the students' uniform.
Yeah. Well, that quite looks like the students' uniform, even back in the 1920s or something.
But if you look at the first two pictures, you don't really see that many differences. Only, you know, they have two top pockets. And for the student, they have only one, I guess. Yeah, they have
On the
less
top.
stuff to
Yes.
put in the pocket.
No, it's important for students to have one pocket here because they usually need to put a pen here.
Pen or pencil.
Yeah.
That's true.
But at the time, you know, for women, there is one very special jacket. Well, it's called in Chinese the Lianing Zhuang, or say Lenin
Style. Yes.
Yeah.
I guess maybe it's borrowed from the Soviet Union or
Yes,
what, we're not
yes.
quite sure. But it seems it was very popular at the time.
Right. That looks like a wedding because you have the huge 喜字
Double
means that-
happiness.
Yeah, yeah. I remember seeing pictures of my grandmother dressed up like this in army uniform. She was not a soldier. She was not in the military, but she told me it was purely fashion. And especially if you go to a 照相馆, like you go to a photo shop, because back then not everyone have a camera in a house, in their home. So you have to go to a photo shop.
The photo studio.
A photo studio, and they would lend you those uniforms, and you put them on, and basically they're all in one size. If you're slimmer, you just have to
You have the belt
tighten
anyway.
your belt.
You have the belt anyway. After all the Civil War, after the Second World War, so soldiers they were like seen like the idols of the role models of the society. So anything associated with the army life, with soldiers, would be very popular.
Yeah.
And that's why you would see anything close to the army uniforms seen as fashion.
Right, and also army colors as well, like navy blue and army green,
khaki.
Yeah.
I think these are the three major colors that you could find. You could found on streets during that time.
Although I think also even back then, I think little girls might have red hair ties or red. And here we are. Okay, so this is some red clothing. Now,
well,
what year would this be?
It's like the influence of the Soviet Union at the time. The story was like, there was a Soviet leader visiting China. They said, well, it seems that Chinese people at the time were only wearing black, blue, or, all these dark colors. And he said, we're socialist countries and it should be colorful. The society should be more colorful. So why don't you wear something more colorful? And that seemed to be also coming from the Soviet Union. And you see, more colors and the styles could be different. But some would put it this way. It's like a combination of the top of a shirt. Because if you see the collars,
it has collars.
The mix of a shirt and a skirt.
Not adult women. Adult women were, at this point, I believe, still not very diverse in the colors that they wore,
But we don't know. I mean, it was long before we were born, so the information that we've got,
we could have only
imagined. Books, or on TVs, or on films.
But I trust the bludgie was in style for many, many years, because I remember when I was in elementary
no,
I think it was also in style in the 80s. Girls did wear dresses in that shape, in that form.
The thing is, and fashion is something that comes back and it's going, comes back again.
Right.
There are recycles.
So if we're looking at those old photos today, it's like we're looking at like the cutting edge fashion of today.
You never know, so never throw those away, and sometimes it will be coming back.
Yes.
And of course, mouse suit.
Oh yes.
Well, this is the founding ceremony of the People's Republic. Chairman Mao announcing, declaring the founding of New China.
Yes.
And he's wearing that. Well, now it's known as Mao suit, but before it's called. Well, it's in Chinese. It's actually 中山装, the Sun Yat-sen style.
Yes. Sun Yat-sen actually developed his own style of clothing, that jacket. That's why it's named after him.
Yeah, it's slightly different maybe from the original version, but this is now seen as the Chinese style, Chinese dress.
Yes. Iconic.
Right.
It's very iconic.
In the UK, because for every year there would be a big banquet inviting all these diplomats attending that big banquet, and all these diplomats, they were asked, the dress code would be like a formal or black tie or white tie. And you're supposed to wear something of your own country, of your own culture. So it's Mao suit. Many people would choose Mao suit.
Even today, I mean, today, the people wear Mao suits. I know Jackie Chan likes to wear Mao suits.
Yes.
He wears them quite frequently.
Yeah, it's considered a typical Chinese style of jackets for men.
And it's nice too. I know a lot of my guy friends that wear them. They say they like wearing Mao suits because you don't have to wear a tie.
And it's warm.
And it's warm. That's true.
Yeah. And that was like a huge change from the traditional Chinese long gowns plus a out jacket.
Yes.
That's the traditional Chinese dress at the time, before maybe even 70s, 80 years ago in the Qing Dynasty or early Republic of China period. Yeah. And for women, it's always qipao, the long gown. That's Song Qingling, Sun Yat-sen's wife, on the right side.
Yes. She actually, I think she actually made a longer sleeve out of a qipao, because usually qipao should have a very short sleeve that only covers your shoulder, doesn't cover your arm. But then I think it was around her time that they starting to have longer sleeves for qipao. And nowadays you can find sleeves that go below your elbow. And that's just warmer and more fashioning style.
Yeah.
And if you watch those movies, which are supposed to be reflecting life in the 30s or 40s, you'll see lots of women wearing qipaos.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
yes,
these
made
long
out
gowns
of
for women.
all kinds of material, not just silk, but cotton and
Cotton,
Exactly.
all kinds.
But
yeah.
you know, it looks very nice, but at the same time, really requires you having a very good figure because
Yes.
you know.
Well, and it's quite exhausting to wear a qipao for a long time because you
have to hold your
have to
breath.
keep a certain posture.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But it's beautiful.
It is.
beautiful
It is
dress.
very beautiful. These are some new pictures, but before we tell you more about these pictures, let's take a short break. Well, we are talking about the changes that have been happening in the past decades about how Chinese people dress themselves, dress ourselves. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Crossover, where we've been talking about the changes, or say the evolution of Chinese fashion, say, in the past decades. And just now we've been talking about the changes or the way Chinese people dress ourselves in the 50s. And these are some new pictures. I guess it's in the latter part of the 50s, and it's more about the working class, the working women, working men. And it seems these outfits are very popular with the young workers at the time.
And here, actually, you do see some color. So I take back what I said earlier. Older adult women did wear certain colors at the time, but I think you saw most color variety in young children.
Right, but you see on the right side, in that picture, you'll see overalls.
Overalls.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a time they encouraged young women to sign up for the factories and become a worker. That was when China decided we have to put more power on our industries, on the industrial sector. So that's why people start to wear that. It's just easier to work
More
like
functional,
a man.
functional clothing.
Yeah. This is a very famous actress at the time called Bai Yang.
So it's a cardigan with a qipao inside. That's quite classic,
Yeah.
actually.
Very.
Even nowadays, we can wear that.
Like in the movies, for the actresses, it's like all the time, like everywhere. Either it's leading the trend or it's a reflection of what's happening in real life.
And that still happens today,
Right,
too. Yeah.
exactly. So,
And also, I think women dressed up in that way were mostly, well, I couldn't say well-educated, but at least they received a higher education, probably. And their jobs are usually more likely to be like teachers or writers. You know, they're doing jobs like that. And so it was very obvious that you could judge a woman, especially a woman's career, by looking at what she wears.
so it's very much straightforward.
Yes.
Well, this is a very interesting mix of two pictures.
Boy, I'll say.
You know, on the left side, it's it shows the dressing style of that period in China, and at the same time, new changes are happening because in Europe it was also after it's also the post-war period.
Yeah.
But at the time it was like something is coming back because during wartime, everything is about war, and you wouldn't actually have time to pay much attention to how you dress yourselves. But it seems life is coming back at the time.
Yeah.
So, have you heard about this new look campaign? It's in the fashion industry in France. It's been introduced by the designer Christian Dior in 1947. So in the 50s, it was like a huge trend.
Yeah, I know. It took a while for economies all over the world to recover after World War II concluded. And I think especially with fashion, it took a while for economies to recover and for people to start being able to afford to follow fashion. And also, a lot of things, I know in Great Britain, clothing was rationed. You had to have ration tickets to get clothing. So in the 50s, you finally started seeing, less rationing of clothing and more, purchasing power sort of given back to people.
When you look at those years, it would be very interesting to see the two different directions that the two countries or the two cultures were going at the time. And in the 60s, and according to some designers, it was like the golden period for designers, because some of the products produced in the 60s were still popular here. At least the design is still popular today.
Yes.
Remember, like the White Rabbit candy, sugar.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
yes. Oh, yes, it is.
White Rabbit.
It's very popular still today.
Yeah, White Rabbit candy.
Yeah, if you look at the wrappers of those candies, it's classic.
Yes.
But before we go into those details, let's take another break. You're watching Crossover. We've been talking about the evolution, say, in fashion in China in the past decades. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Crossover. So it's now the 60s, and so we're talking about what are the items which were first produced or invented in the 60s, but still popular in today.
I think those hot, those warm, those water warmers,
Thermoses. Water thermoses.
Yeah.
But big ones, because in China, people like to drink hot water.
Right.
And oftentimes, especially back then, all the drinking water had to be boiled first. So once it was boiled, it was poured into these big thermoses, and they were usually enamel thermoses.
Yes.
And lots of things were done in enamel back then.
And I remember back then when people got married, it was like a thermoses would be, usually they would give them a pair of thermoses. It would be like the best gift they could expect.
And also basins.
Oh yeah, there we are.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so next to the thermoses, this is interesting, is a spittoon.
Yeah.
You know what? You know, the Chinese culture is being embraced by people around the world, and they love the pattern of a spittoon like that, and love the colors, like the pictures. And I've seen a picture of foreign friends. Actually, we talked about this in Crossover.
Drinking beer, right?
Yes.
They used it to,
out of really.
It's brand new. It's brand new. It's clean. But you know, for Chinese people, if you associate that picture with the original function of this,
it's a bit of a stretch.
Yes, that's a interesting picture. But if you still, I mean, these years, if you go to those hot commercial areas in Beijing or in Shanghai, of these cities, you'll see stuff like that.
You can still find enamel things, although now they're very expensive.
Enamel
and
also,
mugs,
the thermoses nowadays they produce are much smaller. They're about this size, and they're simply for decoration. I think you cannot really store that much water in them. And also, my friends bought a old style mug, and remember back in the old days, because usually we would use one mug probably for many years, and the mug all becomes old, and some parts of it actually came off. So my friend bought a brand new one and started smashing it on the ground to make it look like an antique.
And remember, on those cups, on those mugs, you see those slogans. It's like,
劳动最光荣, something like working is like the most glory thing you could do, one could do.
Or 抓革命促生产, it's like revolutionary is always should be put in the first place, and production is the most important thing.
Right, or 为人民服务,
serve the people. You see these slogans, but these years you still see those enamel cups of mugs, but those slogans are a bit different.
Yes, they're more modern with a more touch of humor in it, things like this.
Right.
Yeah.
And
but it's a good way when fashions come back, but it also actually consists modern elements in it. That's a good combination.
Right, here is another item which is very sought after at the time. It's a watch.
Is that a Shanghai?
It's a Shanghai. The brand is called Shanghai. It's produced in Shanghai. At the time, you know, the price of a watch like that, it's 125 RMB.
That was a lot.
Very expensive.
Yeah. Remember, that's like 3 months' salary for a worker. For these years, it's 75. Still, these years.
You could still buy them?
I mean, it's still there, but it's
really?
75. But it's, you know, you'll say, it's so much cheaper these years.
Yeah.
But that at the time was like 3 must-have items when you get married.
A bicycle.
Maybe a sewing machine.
Yeah, a sewing machine.
And a watch.
I don't know. Yeah,
and a watch.
And a watch, probably.
You know, different places, they have different versions. But these are some posters from that period. You'll see, again, revolutionary was still the theme, and you see color red. is in the dominant position.
Yes.
Very and also, if you go to Chijiuba nowadays, go to the modern, the contemporary art studios of China nowadays, you can see pictures painted in those styles. They actually adopted the style. And they would paint the workers and then the farmers and the students, you know, all standing together. And it was quite interesting when Barack Obama was running his presidential campaign, and they actually showed me some pictures from his websites. He actually had pictures of him in the middle with those, you know, if you look at the top right picture, that's Chairman Mao, and then behind him, that was all the supposedly to be the lights, you know, all the
rays of the sun.
Yeah. And then they actually had this Obama's O, and then there were lasers of suns behind it, but they were blue, and it looked so much like those old-fashioned paintings.
Well, this is like the creative industry of Chinese people, of Chinese designers. We'll show you actually a car being produced also in the 60s, and that was like the first car designed and produced by Chinese. It's called Red Flag. Of course, it's based on a imported car. It's Chrysler.
Nowadays, I don't know, do they require like a Chinese official, a government official, if you go to a certain diplomatic event, you need to be driven in a
certain brands are included in the shopping list of the civil servants or government organizations.
But Hongqi, the red flag car brand, does still exist.
Yes, it does.
Remember,
there are taxis that are actually red flag.
Right,
That's right.
It's still there. But remember for the 60th anniversary, and we had that huge parade. And when Hu Jintao came out for inspection of the army at the time, it was a Hongqi.
In a Hongqi.
It's a new one, a new model, but it was still the Hongqi, the red flag. And at the same time, in the West, I guess, a lot is happening. What is the movement? The hippies, right?
The 60s. Yeah. A lot of sort of modern art influences on fashion and clothing and...
Hippies, what are I guess, the iconic...
very short dresses.
Skirt? Okay.
Hairstyle, maybe?
High hair.
And the
Beatles.
Yeah. And
then
Marilyn Monroe?
Yeah, Marilyn Monroe. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. The classic blonde beauty should look like her. No one actually could, I think, surpass her after her.
Oh yeah, she's
really
iconic.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
So in the 60s, and well, again, I mean, China and the West was not that much connected at the time.
What was it like in the Western world?
Well, in the United States, I wasn't born. I wasn't born yet, but I know Jackie Kennedy had a huge influence on fashion in the United States. I can't speak for Europe, but at least for the States, in the 50s, 60s, she continued even after the 60s. Even after the assassination of Kennedy, she still continued to be. And also another icon,
mainly the way she dressed?
Yes, and her fashion. Also, well, I think she was more of a three-dimensional sort of icon, not just fashion, but her fashion was also very, very, very much influential in the fashion industry.
Was she the first lady being known widely by the public at the time?
By the public, and I think also maybe the first lady to be known
as a fashion icon.
Yeah,
for herself.
For her style. She very much had her own style, and that was a big influence. I can remember my grandmother talking about Jackie Kennedy and how everyone at the time, my grandmother's age, would try to sort of emulate her style and dress in that way.
The information that we might get about what's happening in the West in the 60s were mainly maybe from